Morning, Naomi here. Thought we'd do a short video on 30 pieces of silver. Yeah, and I should have looked that verse up, and I didn't. Zechariah 11, when the daughter Zion breaks her staff, showing she's breaking her covenant as the righteous spirit that's in covenant with these men who kept casting her off, wanted a covenant with the whore spirit. But she's shown breaking her covenant. She says, "And I will feed the flock of slaughter, even you, O poor of the flock. And I took unto me 2 staves," okay? "The one I called Beauty, that had her name on it, and the other I called Bands, and I fed the flock." That was her inheritance, saying, "No, my covenant is no longer with Israel. I break my covenant. I am no longer the righteous spirit that will govern you. You want a covenant with that whore spirit," which takes you right back to the garden. Adam chose a covenant with the whore spirit, cast off his own wife, renamed her Eve, set her out of the Adam. It says, if I be like Adam and cover iniquity in my bosom. Well, he lied. He points at her and says, her fault, her fault, her fault. They love it. And here you see it again, happening again, because that's how the Lord teaches us, again and again and again, and shows to us in a variety of ways. And here they're casting off the daughter of Zion, who was the law, the one who gave the laws. She was the spirit with the word, given in covenant to these men on Mount Zion, and they were casting her off. They simply didn't want a covenant. And then she says in verse 10, "And I took my staff, even Beauty, and cut it asunder, that I might break my covenant which I had made with all the people." Now they'll tell you it's a man here speaking. It's not. It's the spirit, she. We've proven the spirit's a she. They go on and on about, any information that you pull up about the red heifer. It's just about impossible to understand why it's a feminine. But it's really not. It's the spirit that purifies the body and makes it acceptable unto God. And that's why you find that same correlation in view, or that same passage in view in Hebrews 9, referring to the ashes of the heifer that was used to cleanse the body. It is the spirit that makes you the image of God. Christ was filled with this spirit. The heifer represents the eternal spirit. She must cleanse the body in order to make us acceptable unto God. And that's why it's represented as a heifer. And it tells you that in Hebrews 9, that your heifer is your eternal spirit. Okay? So here we have daughter Zion, who is the spirit given in covenant. And they rejected her, so she breaks her covenant with them. Alright? And it was broken in that day. And so the poor of the flock waited upon me, and knew that it was the word of the Lord. They knew it. When it's saying the poor of the flock, it's referring to the women. It's referring to these daughters of Zion, because there was more than one. But this one was the daughter Zion. And so she says to either the high priest or to the king, she says, "And I said unto them, if ye think good, give me my price, and if not, forbear." So they weighed for my price 30 pieces of silver. That's her mantle. All right? She says, in verse 13, she says, "And the Lord said unto me, cast it unto the potter, a goodly price that I was prized at of them. And I took the 30 pieces of silver and cast them to the potter in the house of the Lord. And then I cut asunder mine other staff, even Bands, that I might break not the brotherhood, but her covenant with the nation of Israel." She was saying, fine, you don't want me as your ruling spirit? Fine, we'll break it. But Mother says, all right, when they pay you for your mantle, and I suppose that it was a true physical item, this mantle, which represented the mantle of man. Okay? So the mantle is the body that the spirit wears. That begins to become our understanding. So we know what Christ was valued at in the New Testament, what he was sold for. He was sold for 30 pieces of silver. Well, Christ represents the new temple, the new body. But his spirit was the key of David that was rejected in the very beginning. And that is your righteous daughter that is given in covenant with the word, the law of heaven. And it was rejected by man. He didn't want a covenant with her. Okay? And that's why you're getting this correlation with, she sold her mantle here. And that was her right to this body. She sold it. That's your fallen Adam right there. She says, fine, I've tried and I've tried and I've tried. They're not listening to me, Mother. So Mother says, fine, sell the mantle. And it's an allegory. It's a representation that she could no longer use this body to work through. And so she breaks her covenant with that. And so that's why the she-goat is, or that's why the scapegoat is a she-goat. Azazel, as is a she-goat. It's a female that's cast off to wander in a land not inhabited. Well, the land not inhabited now for her was this body, because here she is shown selling her mantle, which is this body, for 30 pieces of silver. And Christ was betrayed for 30 pieces of silver, and that's your correlation there. He becomes her new mantle. Now he becomes the new way that the Spirit operates through, because she inhabits the Holy of Holies. She is what sits on the throne in the Holy of Holies, and she is called the Key of David, and she is called Daughter Zion. And here she broke that covenant, and Mother says, cast it to the potter's field. Well, not to the potter's field, to the potter's house, but your potter is your creator. What shapes that mantle? And she says, I'll shape it in Isaiah 49, and I'll make it a greater mantle, because now you'll not only be a light unto the Israelites, but you will now be a light unto the Gentiles. And so she makes this mantle greater after the daughter Zion, I believe, was told by Mother God, Mother Yahweh, to break her covenant with these men who no longer wanted her. And that takes us back to what Adam did in the very beginning. He sets her apart. He does not want a covenant with her, because they, like Adam, have transgressed the covenant. Transgress there means to be unfaithful. He chose a covenant with the whore spirit. And that covenant you see in Old Testament law. That's what that covenant come to look like. Because Old Testament law, it says iniquity is shaped by the law. So it's showing you that Old Testament law was the covenant between the whore spirit and fallen Adam, because sin was shaped under this law. The law of heaven is your 10 commandments. And this covenant becomes greater, okay, through the second Adam, because now she, being cast off and owed into the fields of the Gentiles, gets to claim not only Israel as her birthright, but she gets to claim the Gentiles as well. And so this mantle becomes a much greater and grander mantle, because she's not only a light unto the Israelites, she is now a light unto the Gentiles as well. And so we looked at that. We wanted to look at that. Now, is there anything else out there I wanted to talk about? There's a lot of things I certainly could talk on, but you know, the snare that they fall into, that this Antichrist has fallen into, men of the world have fallen into, that they're gods. He, God. That's God. She's just a rib hanging off the image of God. No, she was the Spirit indwelling, giving him life. And when he casts her out and makes a covenant with the whore spirit, he makes a covenant with death. That's what he does when he does that. So those two women, that's your allegory. One puts you as a slave under the law, because it's the whore spirit. With Adam, that's the covenant under the law, to make her a slave, to make righteous men slaves, so that they never understand the truth either. And you find that in Galatians 4:24. And then Mother says to him, and it is Mother speaking, she says, know ye not that your own right hand can save you? She says, have thou an arm like unto God, in Job 40. And then several verses later she says, then I will confess a thing unto thee, know thee not thine own right hand can save thee. Well, we discovered daughter Zion was identified as the strong right arm of God in passages like Isaiah 51, Isaiah 52, and Psalm 89. Those passages will verify for you that the strong right arm of God was daughter Zion. And now she's the one who sits to Christ's right, because she's his strong right arm. She's sitting to his right in Psalm 110. And mother says to Christ, to her only begotten son, because mother's the one that delivered the son to us, and she did that to retrieve her daughter that was rejected by fallen Adam in the beginning, because she's always been here. And now she's reborn in a selected group of daughters at the end of time who have received Christ as the second Adam, their mantle to work through. But she says to Christ in Psalm 110, she said, I'll send your strength out of Zion. That's daughter Zion. It's not son Zion, it's daughter Zion. Again, they want to put three males. Male, male, male. Your Godhead is male and female. Alright? And mother is obviously sitting to father's right hand. And father tells you, I don't do nothing without her. I'd die without her. Alright? She's the be-all, end-all. Without her, nothing happens. And without daughter Zion rising up in the earth as this key of David, as Christ's strong right arm, as his spirit manifested in the earth, you will not be delivered. You're not going to be delivered without them. And it tells you that in Romans 11. If the casting off of them were the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? And it's talking about Israel. Well, now Israel's heritage was claimed through the woman. It could not be claimed through any man. And when these daughters were cast off, they were cast off out into the fields of the Gentiles. And now they get to claim them as their birthright as well. And so they're reborn in the end of days. That's what this is all entailing. And so I'm just going to leave it there. Anyway, she was scapegoated for it all. You find her in the Genesis 15:9 Abrahamic Sarah covenant. You have the heifer, she-goat, ram, turtle dove, pigeon in Genesis 15:9, and then they say the feminine don't matter. Really? She was scapegoated for what Adam did. He chose a covenant with the whore spirit, and that whore spirit and fallen Adam pointed at the righteous spirit and blamed her and said it was all her fault. And she becomes that scapegoat that gets scapegoated. The male has to die, and the female has to have all the sins of Israel placed upon her head, and she's set out in a desert land. Well, that's your allegory to what she did in Zechariah 11 when she breaks her covenant. She can no longer use this mantle, this body, all right? And that is why men like Moses was so important to her. She needed to work through a man. And he was that man. Moses was that man in the beginning that was willing to give the words of heaven. And then he comes down from Mount Sinai, and there they are making a covenant of a calf. And but he receives her as the spirit that worked through him. And so that's what she did. She needed a man to work through to put her back in her rightful place, and that's what Christ is for us. He put the mantle, put us back in this mantle where we always belonged. And that's what sits in the Holy of Holies, is the daughter Zion. And so I know that's a poor overview. I'm a little tired today. But I'll probably throw it up anyway, knowing me. So may God bless you all. And I hope you have a blessed day.